Harvard professor Cornel West and economist Sylvia Hewlett believe that parenting in America has become a countercultural activity. They have co-authored a new book called The War Against Parents, which targets big business, government, and media culture for devaluing the role of parents. The book represents a call to action in the form of a parent's Bill of Rights. The bill states that parents are entitled to such things as time for their children, economic security, and a pro-family legal structure. Joining me now, Cornel West, professor of Afro-American Studies and Religious Studies at Harvard. Also here, Sylvia Hewlett, founder and president of the National Parenting Association. I am pleased to have them here to talk about this book, The War Against Parents. Welcome back. How did we get here? If your diagnosis is right, how did we get to this point?
Well, I think on the one hand, we have failed to acknowledge that parenting, the precious act of nurturing, is not simply a privatistic affair. It has civic significance. It has social consequences. And when we look, as Sister Sylvia points out, at the workplace, we see managerial greed run amok. Profits way up, stock markets, new records daily, and wages stagnating, sometimes declining, just beginning to increase incrementally, which means that then parents are squeezed. They're overworked, they're underpaid. Government pulls back, abdicates, leaves families dangling, young people drifting. Then we've got a popular culture that bombards them with narcissism and hedonism and tries to convince them that the market way of being in the world is the only way of being in the world.
So you're suggesting that, notwithstanding the fact that most Americans seem to think the economy is doing well, too many Americans are not being touched by that prosperity, and at the same time, while they're being squeezed, they also are being bombarded by messages that are counter to the welfare of their children.
The children are in trouble. Homeless children tripled since 1980. Young black males between 10 and 14, suicide rates tripled. Children are troubled. We know that. And it's true for vanilla suburbs, it's true for chocolate cities.
And the answer is parenting?
The answer is multivariate.
Well, I think that what we show is that until we create the circumstances that allow moms and dads to come through for their own kids, we won't really get to first base in terms of reweaving that web of care. You know, obviously one needs the village. But if the folks on the front lines, that mom, that dad, are so, I guess, hamstrung by the circumstances of their lives, so demoralized, because, you know, Jolly, we do talk, I think, at some length about the cultural bombardment. Just think of the movies of the 1990s. Even the more innocuous ones, you know, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, Home Alone. I mean, what is the message that comes out vis-a-vis parents? They're bumbling fools, they're stupid, they're incompetent, any 9-year-old can do a better job. I think parents feel very, I guess, blamed, very degraded, very undermined by what is going on in that culture. And they're also working so hard that they barely have time to put together the, I guess, stamina and, I guess, the armament they need to come through for their kids in an age which is so very market-driven that putting real energy into the ultimate non-market acts of caring and nurturing is, I guess, increasingly difficult for everyone.
Do you think parents in America are prepared to listen to someone with a message that will resonate with them?
Well, what we did in this book is that we spent 3 years surveying parents, holding focus groups, holding town hall meetings right across this nation, doing a whole lot of listening, trying to discover what was their most urgent needs and what might constitute common ground. Because for so long, you know, family's been this political football that we've tossed around, and, you know, we've managed to divide parents. Working moms against moms at home, blacks against whites, males against females. In a way, our partnership in this book is symbolic of what we're struggling to do here, which is to find that magical shared territory where the passions that parents undoubtedly feel for those young kids in their charge can be turned into action in the public square. Because, you know, right now, the 62 million parents of America...
let's assume it's turned into action.
Yes.
What would that action be?
Well, you know, the Bill of Rights is the bottom line. It's what these parents told us they wanted. And the Bill of Rights is centered around the time crunch, because we discovered, talking to folks all across this nation, that 91% of moms and dads right now find the parental time famine, the problem that's number one in their lives, the thing that crucifies them, the thing that keeps them up at night, the thing that prevents them, being on the case with their kids. And so what we've done is put together a group of measures that help ameliorate and resolve this enormous problem in their lives.
And I understand, but what are those measures?
Well, it's the time crunch connected to economic security. Right. There has to be jobs, not simply any kind of job, but jobs with a decent and living wage. We talk about increasing minimum wage to at least $7. We talk about eliminating payroll taxes for parents. We talk about trying to lift the burdens on working parents, because what we're actually doing is engaging in a progressive intervention in this very intense debate over American families. We know Dan Quayle and other deeply conservative fellow citizens often consider themselves having a monopoly on the concerns about parents. And we're saying no. That great C. Wright Mills once said, you have to connect personal troubles with public issues if you're going to generate new progressive possibilities. And for too long, progressives have not been able to zero in on troubled families and yet cast it in such a way that workers are empowered, that citizens are empowered, and that there's some accountability of the most powerful and wealthy in our society.
I'll give you a very specific example. In this country right now, 31% of working women still don't have the right to parenting leave when they give birth to a child. And many of them are back at work 10 days after birth. Do you know why? Because that act that, Clinton got through with such fanfare at the beginning of his term was unpaid leave, and it was limited to companies that have more than 50 employees. Yeah. And since the great growth in our economy is actually in, small firms, increasingly new moms have no right to anything. Not even any right to unpaid leave. Now, we're the only nation in the world that creates those kinds of messages and signals around birth. I mean, the message we give parents is that this stuff doesn't matter. We can't afford it anyway.
What would be an appropriate paid leave program for American mothers?
Well, we go talk to a lot of experts. We also, have models from other nations, Australia, Canada, Europe, whatever.
And what did you come up with?
4 months at full pay. 4 months at full pay.
From
which can be
from
shared.
Birth forward, or
yes, for the first 4 months of life is thought to be the minimum amount of time necessary to bond with that new child, to make sure that this family is launched in its new and I think very challenging, if joyous, new phase of things. And that is a minimum. And I think it would make a huge difference. For instance, when I had my first baby here in New York City, I just got 10 days off, and I realized that one is back at work, doing at least 4 things badly.
And what about the fathers?
Well, the fathers are in even worse shape, because we recommend that we have mandatory leave for at least 3 weeks. I mean, that doesn't sound much.
Make them leave.
Well, right now...
From top to bottom. CEOs all the way down.
Yes, because everyone, 43 million folks have lost jobs in this economy in the last 2 decades. There's a lot of insecurity out there. The figures show only 1% of men take the stuff that's on the books because they're all scared that they'll get fired or demoted or reinterpreted on the job. So we have to make it a real right, something that everyone takes.
It is, it seems to me, in America. You and I may disagree over what is a programmatic solution or who the villain is. But there is in America a growing recognition, on the one hand, of the damage to the next generation of kids, because they're not getting enough mothers and not getting enough fathers, and they're not getting enough
not enough love, not enough care, not enough attention. But you think it is.
And the most conservative among us,
that's right,
who prefers the least amount of government, will also recognize that there exists this terrible issue, which is that kids are not getting enough parenting. And the idea of believing in parenting, it seems to me, ought not be capitalistic or socialistic or liberal or conservative. It ought to be a very human idea that what happens to kids is fundamental to what kind of society we are becoming.
Absolutely. And there's a concern for parents across political and ideological lines. The question is, how do we understand what goes into the conditions that allow for parents to come through for their children? You think, for example, Japan has 2% of their children living in poverty. Germany, which is not a country known for its generosity in the past, but it has good and bad, 4% of their children living in poverty. The United States, the richest nation in the history of the world, 20.5%. 42% brown children, 51% black children, and yet we ascribe
25% of American children living in poverty.
20.5,
20.5,
21% roughly. But you think, here on the one hand, we ascribe ethical significance to the future. What makes America America is predicated on a promise that the future will be better. And yet the children are the future, and what do? We either hold at arm's length, ignore their suffering, their voices are not heard. I mean, if children's voices were heard in the way that corporate elites' voices were heard, we'd have a different set of governmental policies. You and I know that.
Right. And
You mean if they could lobby?
If they could lobby and bring power and pressure to bear and so forth, the parents would do that.
Watching Bulworth, that's your problem.
Oh,
Cornel.
Brother Warren, yeah, he's got a good point. I like it. And it's a critique of corporate power through the prism of race. He's not just talking about hip-hop culture.
Yes, last word to you. So.
I guess this book is full of heroes and heroines, because what we've discovered out there is, despite the fact, parents are working 2 jobs, they've never been as burdened as they are right now, they desperately want to be able to come through for their kids. And we're not just talking about helping them with their skills in school. We're talking about, growing these young souls.
The book is The War Against Parents, Sylvia Ann Hewlett and Cornel West. Bill Bradley says this book tackles one of the most important challenges facing America today, how to help children and the parents who raise them. They detail some of the sobering facts about how difficult it is to be a parent today and obstacles presented by the workplace, popular culture, and laws. The book concludes with a plan of action, a parent's Bill of Rights. It seeks to unite parents behind an agenda that spans the usual divide of race and class and gender. If you care about your kids, or if you do not have kids but care about America's future, says Bill Bradley, read this book. Back in a moment. Stay with us.